My name's John Carlson. I just spent a week in Tokyo for work. I took off from Los Angeles around 1 p.m. on a Saturday, but by the time I landed in Tokyo, it was already Sunday at 4 p.m., even though the flight itself only took about 11 hours. That whole international dateline thing really messes with you if you're not used to it, but after years of back and forth between the West Coast and Asia, I barely notice the time change anymore. I work for myself as an engineer, mostly focused on designing buildings to withstand earthquakes. Not to sound full of myself, but I've got a pretty good reputation and get hired a lot in those Ring of Fire countries. All that travel means I'm out of town about a week every month, which is why it ended up in Tokyo this time. The week went off without a hitch, and I was set to get back to LA just in time for the weekend. I called my wife, Nancy, and let her know, I'll be leaving Tokyo Friday at 5 p.m. and should be getting into LA around 11:10 a.m. I told her I missed her and couldn't wait to be back home. She asked, "So, what time do you think you'll be home?" I said, "Well, by the time I get my bags and pick up the car, I'll probably get there about 1 p.m. maybe a little after." She replied, "That's great. I can't wait for you to get home. I love you, honey." I couldn't help but smile. "I love you too, baby. See you soon." "Bye," she said, and hung up. Maybe I should give you some background about us. I'm 36, about 6'2", and I weigh in at around 200 pounds. I've got dark hair and, I guess, a rugged look since I spend a lot of time outdoors. I work out at the gym regularly, so I'm in decent shape. Most people would say I look pretty fit, and honestly, I think I'm a decent looking guy. Nancy, though, is in a league of her own. She could easily be a model if she wanted to. She's stunning, her looks and her figure always turn heads, men and women both. She's 34, has long dark hair, stands about 5'5", and her figure just fits her perfectly. If you're the kind who cares about numbers, she's a 36C2435. Any guy who doesn't think Nancy's a solid 10 probably just isn't into women. I'm head over heels for her, if you can't already tell. Like I said, I'm a self-employed engineer, specializing in earthquake-resistant design. The money's good, and on top of my usual pay, I get a small percentage of the lease income from every building I've worked on. After 8 busy years, those percentages really add up, over $5 million a year, if you can believe it. Nancy knows about the money, but she doesn't really care much about it. We only dip into our lease income for big stuff, like if we're buying a new house, a car, or something special like art or jewelry. We give a fair amount to charity, and the rest gets invested. Nancy just goes along with whatever I decide investment-wise, but I do try to keep her in the loop. One of our investments is 3 health club franchises around LA, one in Thousand Oaks, one in Santa Monica, and another in Rolling Hills Estates, where we live. I got involved with this franchise early on. They promised to be a step above the rest, and honestly, they are. Those gyms have been a great investment, and Nancy and I use the one near our house. We never get any special treatment, and only the manager knows we own the place. We just go because it's a nice spot and it's close by. Nancy doesn't work, and she doesn't need to. Instead, she keeps busy volunteering with a couple of charities every week, does some fundraising for a big-name hospital, and spends plenty of time at the gym. She packs her week with activities and likes to spend evenings and weekends with me whenever I'm home. Every now and then, she even comes with me on my business trips. So, back to the present. I landed in LA at 11:10 a.m. on Friday, just as planned. That means I actually arrived 6 hours before I left. Sounds crazy, but it's just how the dateline works. It messes with your head, but it's the truth. If you've ever flown from Detroit to Chicago, you know you can arrive before you left too, thanks to the time zone difference. It's not the dateline, but it helps explain how I got back from Tokyo early. From Detroit to Chicago, you beat the clock. From Tokyo to LA, you beat the calendar. When I landed, the first thing I did was call home to tell Nancy I'd arrived, but she didn't answer. I left a message on our machine and went to grab my bags from the carousel. The wait took longer than usual, so I just killed time until my luggage finally showed up. Once I had everything, I took the shuttle out to my car. Since Nancy wasn't home, I figured I'd swing by my office and knock out some paperwork so the next week would be easier. I made it home a little after 5 in the evening, and I noticed Nancy's BMW was parked in the garage. But there was also a Ford F-150 sitting in my usual spot. I parked behind Nancy in the driveway, headed into the garage, and closed the door behind me. Out of curiosity, I took a look around the truck, just to see if I could figure out whose it was. I noticed a pay stub on the seat from the health club, with the name Roger Williams on it. Right away, my stomach dropped. Roger is basically the poster child for the perfect male. He's a trainer at our gym, and aside from his face, he could have been Arnold Schwarzenegger's twin back in the day. And just to be clear, I don't mean Danny DeVito. Roger stands about 6'4", probably weighs in at 230 pounds, and there's not an ounce of extra fat on him. The more I thought about Roger, the worse I felt. I went inside and called out for Nancy, but she didn't answer. Figured she was probably upstairs. That sinking feeling in my gut just kept getting worse. I decided to move quietly and see what was going on. So, I crept up the stairs and down the hallway toward our bedroom. As I got closer to the door, I could hear voices and some pretty unmistakable sounds. At that point, my heart just sank. It hit me hard. My wife, the woman I loved more than anything, was up there with Roger. I figured Nancy must have mixed up my schedule, thinking I'd be home at 11:10 a.m. on Saturday, not Friday. She probably forgot how the date line messes with the calendar. She must have thought she had the whole night to herself before Roger left in the morning. She definitely got the timing wrong. All I could do was stand there, frozen. I stayed out in the hallway, just listening. I don't know how long I stood there, maybe 15, 20, even 30 minutes, just hearing the sounds and their conversation. My insides felt like they were twisting up, and the anger kept building every second, but I just listened. Even though it's tough to say, what I heard left no room for doubt about what was going on. Their words were explicit, but what cut the deepest was the way Nancy talked to Roger, and how she compared me to him. She called out his name, said things I never imagined hearing from her, and made it painfully clear she was involved with him while I was away. I could feel my blood pressure climbing through the roof. I was hurting, furious, and totally betrayed, but also just boiling over with anger. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I shouted at the top of my lungs, "You sons of bitches." I burst into the bedroom, not thinking about anything but what I'd just heard. There they were, Roger and my wife, caught in the act, both facing away from me. The moment I walked in, they jumped apart, both of them frozen with shock. I didn't hold back. "Get away from my wife, you lowlife," I yelled, my voice echoing through the room. "Get your sorry self out of my house, right now. I mean it, get out." Nancy broke down, crying and shouting at the same time. I told her, "I'll deal with you in a minute," my voice cold and trembling. I turned back to Roger and barked, "Move it, Roger. Now." I let my anger take over and made the mistake of grabbing him, trying to force him out of the room. That wasn't smart. If I hadn't grabbed him, maybe he'd have just left without making things worse. But as soon as I put my hands on him, he went into full defense mode, and it turned ugly fast. He grabbed my arms and shoved me backward, not listening to Nancy's pleas to stop. He was so much bigger and stronger than me, and he pushed me down the hall like I weighed nothing. When we got to the top of the stairs, he gave me one last shove, and I went tumbling all the way down. As I fell, I heard Nancy screaming. The pain hit me instantly, bones breaking, everything hurting, then everything just faded to black. The next thing I knew, a paramedic was kneeling beside me, wrapping my left arm in a foam cast. I had an oxygen mask on, and every part of me ached, my head, my chest, my arms, my legs. They loaded me onto a stretcher and finished checking me over before getting me ready for the ambulance. When I managed to show them I was awake, the paramedic asked if I wanted to say anything, so I motioned for him to take the mask off. Before I answered any of his questions, I said, "Whatever you do, don't take me to Mount S Hospital in LA. I want to go to OP Hospital in Inglewood." Nancy had connections at Mount S, and I wanted no part of that. I didn't want her pulling any strings or showing up where I was being treated. I added, "And I don't want my wife anywhere near me. Don't let her in my room, no matter what happens." I heard Nancy gasp behind me. "John, please don't do this, I want to be there for you," she pleaded. I tried to shout, but what came out was more of a pained gurgle. "No way, I don't want to see her. Do you hear me?" The pain in my chest made it clear I'd broken some ribs and probably had worse going on inside. The paramedic nodded to let me know he understood, and then they took me to OP Hospital. After the doctors finished patching me up, I found myself in the ICU, listed as critical. I had a concussion, my left arm was broken, I'd cracked 4 ribs, and 1 lung had collapsed. I was on oxygen, and there was a tube in my side to help my lung reinflate. I was lucky, honestly, I could have snapped my neck or my back. Nancy tried to visit a bunch of times, but the staff stuck to my wishes and kept her away. She tried calling, but I refused every time. She sent notes, but I tore them up without reading a word. Friends dropped by to check on me, and each time they mentioned that Nancy wanted to talk. I wouldn't hear it. All told, I spent about 3 weeks in the hospital, 10 days in ICU and another 11 days in a regular room. A couple of times, the police came by and asked if I wanted to press charges against Roger. I turned them down. I just wanted it all to be over. While I was laid up in the hospital, I had plenty of time to think about where my life had been and what might come next. Here's the thing, I've had a temper for as long as I can remember. It's simple to say, but there's a lot behind it. My parents always knew I could fly off the handle, and they'd do anything to keep me from getting upset. Sure, there were times I lost it, but it wasn't all that often. But when it happened, you didn't want to be anywhere near me. I could go from zero to over the edge real quick. That's pretty much what happened that day I found Nancy and Roger. My temper exploded, but Roger was just stronger than me. No matter how angry I was, he got the better of me that day. But believe me, the rage was real. Thinking back, I remember when I was about 11, trying to fix the gears on my bike. The chain kept sticking, and every time it jammed up, my frustration just built and built. I finally lost it, picked up the whole bike, and threw it as far as I could. The front fork snapped clean off, both tires blew, and I bent the wheels so badly the bike was toast. I just looked at the wreck and yelled, "I don't care if I never ride that stupid thing again." Then I stomped into the house and told my mom they'd have to buy me a new one, because the old bike was done for. To her credit, my mom didn't sugarcoat it. She looked at me and said, "John, I saw what just happened. This time, you're going to have to deal with the fallout from your temper. We don't have the money to buy another bike right now, so you'll have to figure out how to fix this one, or go without for a while." I threw a fit about it, sure, but it passed quickly. Right then and there, I realized that letting my anger get the best of me would only lead to more trouble. I understood I needed to change if I wanted to avoid some harsh consequences down the line. I still had that temper, but I made a promise to myself to keep it under control, so I wouldn't have to go through something like this again. Eventually, my dad helped me put the bike back together, and it was rideable again. But the lesson stuck with me. After that, I hardly ever lost my cool like that again. My parents noticed, too, and I think they were pretty relieved. They didn't have to tiptoe around me so much anymore. So, how did I handle my anger as I got older? Instead of blowing up, I'd quietly scheme ways to get back at whoever had crossed me. I'd spend hours thinking up plans for payback. But usually, by the time I'd thought it all through, my anger would fade. I never actually went through with my revenge, the process just let me cool off. Life would move on. But this time felt different. Lying there in that hospital bed, I started thinking about how I could get even, with Roger, and with Nancy, too. I wanted them both to pay for what they'd done. It didn't take me long to figure out my plan. All I needed now was to get a few people on board and get discharged from the hospital so I could set things in motion. First, I called Jim Burton, the manager at the Rolling Hills Estates Health Club we owned. Jim came up to the hospital to visit, and I asked him to do a little discreet digging on Roger, just to find out everything he could, quietly. Jim gave me a strange look when I brought it up. He said, "John, I actually already know a few things about Roger, but I'll check into his activities some more." I asked him, "What do you know already, Jim?" Jim told me, "Well, his name never comes up, but I'm pretty sure he's behind several broken marriages among our club's members." I just sighed. "Jim, he's the reason I'm here in the hospital, and he's the reason my marriage is falling apart, too." Jim nodded and said, "I get it, John. I'll dig up as much as I can about him and let you know the details." I told him, "Just keep this between us for now, until I tell you otherwise." "No problem," Jim said. "Take care of yourself, boss." When Jim checked back in with me, he told me that there were rumors about Nancy and Roger being together for the past couple of months. Roger was her personal trainer, and a lot of people around the club had seen him flirting with her. She never told him to back off. All the women liked Roger because he was a real heartthrob, and plenty of them were speculating that he and Nancy were an item. Jim also told me that Roger had gotten involved with quite a few other women at the club: Sue Johnson, Mary Jo Lewis, Jane Baldwin, Sally Dorrell, and more. 3 marriages ended in divorce, 1 woman had a breakdown, and a lot of other couples were having problems because of him. I told Jim to sit on that information until I gave him the go-ahead. When the time was right, he'd be able to fire Roger for inappropriate behavior with club members. It would be quick and easy, and there wouldn't be any fallout for the business. When I finally got out of the hospital, I went home. Nancy was there, and she pleaded with me, "Please, John, can't we at least talk about this?" I told her straight, "Nancy, I'm not ready to discuss any of this right now. I'm going to move out for a while, but at some point, I'll come back." I packed a couple of bags and got ready to leave. "Nancy," I said, "I'm moving into the condo downtown. Please don't come by, and don't call me there." Once I settled in at the condo, I started reaching out to the people I needed to pull off my plan. All I could do was wait for my body to heal up. Nancy ignored my request and called me every single day. Eventually, I started answering the phone, but all I ever told her was that she had to let me work through the mess she'd created. I refused to meet up or talk about what had happened, and definitely didn't tell her what I was planning. Finally, it was time to put my plan in action. I told Jim to arrange for Roger to stay late at the club on Friday night. We told him he'd be meeting a new client who needed a personal trainer, totally believable, and it made sure he'd be there alone. At 9:30 that night, I walked into the club with 5 masked men. 3 of them were husbands of women Roger had been with, and the other 2 were bodybuilders from our Thousand Oaks location. They came along to make sure there wouldn't be any trouble from Roger. As soon as Roger realized what was happening, he tried to bolt, but we all cornered him. The guys held him, and then we took him by van to a rundown little motel in a rough part of town. You should know that the 3 husbands each got a bit of their own closure that night. One by one, they confronted Roger, letting out some of their pain. Each man took a turn, roughing him up a little and telling him, "This is for what you did to my wife, and to me." He didn't walk away with any permanent injuries, but I doubt he'll ever forget the lesson he got that night. Once they were done, the 2 bodybuilders tied Roger up for me and headed out. He was still groaning on the floor, but honestly, he wasn't badly hurt. With Roger bound like that, even in my condition, I could manage him without much trouble. I wanted him to know that, for a few hours at least, the situation was in my hands. It was time for what I considered the art of revenge. I'd set up for a local tattoo artist, someone who specialized in bold, unmistakable work, to show up around that time. A few minutes later, there was a knock at the door, and in he came, carrying his tools and looking Roger over with a smirk. "Yeah," he said, "this is definitely going to be a memorable job." Over the next few hours, while I held Roger steady, the tattoo artist worked his craft. The messages weren't subtle, and each one was designed to expose what Roger had done. On his forehead, he tattooed, "I betrayed married women." On his left arm, "I broke up Sue Johnson's marriage." On his right arm, "I destroyed Mary Jo Lewis's marriage." Across his chest and back, there were more, naming women and detailing how he'd hurt them and their families. The pain was real for Roger, he groaned through most of it. I wasn't moved by his discomfort. When the artist finished, Roger's days of showing off his physique were over. We left him there, tied up, and I made an anonymous call to the motel, letting the manager know there was a man in need of help in room 17. After that, I had to face things at home. I went back to the house where Nancy was sitting alone in the family room. She came running to me, arms outstretched, but I wasn't interested in reconciliation. Instead, I gently but firmly held her and took her up to the bedroom, where I restrained her to the bed. The tattoo artist followed me home, as we'd arranged. Over the next few hours, he inked a series of messages on Nancy as well. These tattoos called out her betrayal and made it clear what had happened in our marriage. It was a painful experience for her, but at that point, I felt it was the only way to make my point clear. When the tattoos were finished, I untied her and walked away. By the time I got back to the condo, the police were waiting for me. Roger had pressed charges. They put me in handcuffs and took me downtown. I was booked for kidnapping and assault. Nancy never pressed charges, but she was present in court every single day during my trial. During the proceedings, the evidence was laid out for everyone to see, the tattoos, the stories behind them, everything. The prosecutor asked about each tattoo, and I answered honestly. My lawyer let me explain, in detail, the pain and wreckage that Roger had caused, not just to me, but to several families. As I told my story, I watched Nancy in the courtroom, and I could see how much she was hurting. Still, everyone heard the truth about Roger, and, in a strange way, that brought me some satisfaction. When the guilty verdict came in, Nancy broke down, crying in court. Before the judge handed down my sentence, he asked if I wanted to say anything. I kept it simple. All I have to say is, if Nancy wants to stay married to me, she'll have to serve her sentence right alongside mine, living with the consequences of her choices until I get out. If she can't do that, she should divorce me. The judge gave me 5 years at North Kern State Prison. Nancy cried again when she heard the sentence. The judge said the nature of my crimes was troubling, but he also acknowledged the circumstances that led me there. Once I arrived in prison, I had some worries. Stories about what goes on inside had me anxious, I won't lie. But word got around about what I'd done, And surprisingly, a lot of the guys seemed to respect me for standing up for myself. Guys would pat me on the back, saying things like, "Way to go, man." Nobody ever gave me any trouble during my time inside. Now and then, I'd hear rumors about what I'd done, how only someone completely out of their mind would push things as far as I had. I'll be honest, I wasn't proud of it. It was my temper running wild, my desire for payback, and my failure to keep myself in check that put me in this position. Still, I was grateful that people gave me a wide berth. I know there are folks who think what I did was beyond the pale. In a way, they're not wrong. What I did came from the absolute wreckage of my heart and mind after what I'd uncovered. I'd spent years trying to be a better man, but when Nancy betrayed me, all that pain pushed me over the line. One day, I got a long letter from Nancy. Honestly, I didn't want to open it. But prison gets lonely, and after a while, you start craving any kind of contact, even if it's from someone who broke your heart. I let her letter sit for a bit, but eventually I couldn't help myself. I opened it and read every word. Dear John. They keep telling me you don't want to see me, so I'm writing this letter. I hope you'll read it. I'm so sorry for what I did to you. The moment you came into our bedroom and found Roger and me, the look on your face and the anger in your voice made me realize just how much I'd hurt you. In that instant, I knew I'd destroyed our marriage and wounded you in a way I couldn't fix. I'd never seen you like that before. I was terrified, not just for myself, but for what might happen next. I knew I'd made a huge mistake. I never should have gotten involved with Roger. I want to tell you everything, but first, I need you to know that I had planned to end it with him that night. Of course, you ended it for me. I'm so sorry you got hurt, John. I never imagined you'd find out. I told myself it was just a moment of weakness, something I'd get out of my system and move on from. But I was wrong. I hurt you deeply, and I hate myself for it. Maybe none of this matters now, but I want you to know exactly what happened. Roger was the only person I ever cheated on you with. There was never anyone else. At the club, he was always surrounded by women, and I won't lie, I found him attractive too. I had no idea he'd been the cause of so much trouble in other marriages. If I'd known, I'd have stayed far away from him. That's not an excuse, just the truth. He was flattering and attentive, always saying the right things, telling me how good my workouts were, how great I looked, how fit I was. He said all the things any woman wants to hear, and I let my ego get the better of my common sense. Roger brought back an excitement I hadn't felt in a long time. John. I need you to understand, I still love you more than anything. But the spark in our marriage had faded a bit, like it does for so many couples as the years go by. It wasn't anyone's fault. I just found myself craving something new, and for a little while, he gave me that feeling. 2 months before you caught us, while you were out of town, Roger invited me out to dinner. It seemed innocent enough at the time, so I said yes. Looking back, I realize what a mistake it was. One thing led to another, and that night we ended up together. He left around 2 in the morning, and the next day I was overwhelmed with guilt. I cried nearly all day. But I couldn't deny the excitement I'd felt. Later, Roger called and asked to see me again, and I said yes. I wanted to feel that excitement one more time. He stayed the night, left before you got home, and after that we didn't see each other for almost a month. I never saw him when you were in town. When you left for Tokyo, Roger somehow found out and called me again. The pattern repeated itself, dinner, and then we spent the night together. The next morning, I was racked with guilt again. I told myself I needed to end it, but he came over again that Friday, planning to stay the night, and I had decided I would break things off for good in the morning. Obviously, I never got that chance. John, I won't lie, you heard me say things to him you never should have had to hear. Some of what I said was true. He did things with me that we hadn't tried, and I liked them. It hurt you, and for that I'm truly sorry. I wanted to bring that same spark back into our marriage, to reconnect with you and try to build something new together, but now I don't know if that's possible. I've been such a fool. Your revenge hurt me deeply. The tattoos were painful, but it's the humiliation and shame I carry every day that cut the deepest. I know I ruined our marriage, but I never meant to hurt you so profoundly. I can't understand how we ended up hurting each other like this, but I know it was my choices that set this all in motion. I'll never forgive myself for that. I don't know if there's any way for us to move forward after what's happened between us, but I want to try. I'm willing to serve my punishment. I'll live with the tattoos, face the stares and the judgment of others, because I deserve it. I will do this as my sentence, as you asked me to. John, I'll be here when you get out. Please come home to me. Let's try, one last time, to see if our marriage can survive. I love you. Nancy. After serving 2 years for good behavior, I was granted parole. Before release, I went through a psychiatric evaluation. They concluded that what I'd done was an isolated incident, brought on by extreme circumstances, and that I wasn't generally a danger to society. As a condition of my parole, I'd be on probation for 5 more years and continue with psychiatric therapy. During my time in prison, Roger took me to civil court over what had happened to him. My attorneys eventually settled the lawsuit for a substantial amount of money. Honestly, I wasn't all that concerned about the cash, but a small part of me took comfort in knowing he'd never be the same ladies' man again. I figured women would keep their distance from him now. Nancy and I hadn't divorced, nor had she filed for one. When I walked through the door, she was waiting for me. The tattoos she'd gotten because of me were still visible, just as they had been the day I left. She looked at me and said, "I hate you for what you did to me. These past 2 years have been absolute hell. But I still love you. Do you still love me? Do you want me here?" I told her, "I hate what you did to our marriage, and to me. But I'll let you stay, with conditions. I do love you, but I'm not sure love alone is enough. We'll have to see if we can make this work." She agreed to my terms, and we stayed together. Life wasn't easy for her, but it wasn't miserable either. Every time we went out, people saw her tattoos, and the shame on her face was plain as day, especially when we ran into someone who hadn't seen them before. I treated her well enough, she never lacked for anything except public affection from me. I'm not sure why she stayed, but maybe deep down she knew I did still love her. After another year, the bitterness and the urge for revenge faded away. During that time, we started to become close again, even intimate. Nancy did her best to show me her love, and I slowly realized that I still loved her too. We went to counseling, and while it didn't fix everything, it helped us work through most of our issues. It took a long time, but we both wanted to save our marriage. Eventually, I hired the top plastic surgeon I could find to remove her tattoos. Well, all except for one. Nancy insisted on keeping the one that read, "If you touch me, John Carlson will find you." I didn't argue with her about that. As for Roger, things didn't work out so well for him. He lost his job for sexual harassment at the club. He got a chunk of money from the lawsuit, but word was he burned through it fast, couldn't find work anywhere. He managed to get his tattoos removed, but his surgeon wasn't as skilled as Nancy's, and he was left with heavy scarring. Not many women are interested in a man covered with scars on his face, chest, arms, and back. So his life isn't exactly a happy one. I can't say I feel sorry for him. Thanks to therapy, I still get angry now and then, sometimes I snap a little, but it's nothing serious, and I never let it turn into real rage. I've learned to let my anger go instead of holding on to it. Looking back, I believe that if I'd gotten counseling sooner, things might have played out very differently. Maybe I would have left Nancy, maybe I would have forgiven her. I'll never really know. Will Nancy and I ever get back what we lost before her affair? Probably not. Will I ever be able to forget her betrayal? I doubt it. Will she ever forget how far I went for revenge and what it cost her? Most likely not. Are we going to live happily ever after? I wouldn't bet on it. But we will live. And we'll make the most of whatever time we have together. And neither of us will stop trying to recapture what we once shared.